Today's sponsor is Authentic Health. You can find them at shopauthentic.health.com. What if you could get rid of all of those supplement bottle caps that you have right now lingering in your pantry, or like I've had before in a big acrylic bucket on the kitchen counter, much to Mrs. Wright's dismay? What if you could get rid of all that? What if you could even get rid of that expensive green powder that's coming to you on a monthly basis that you never finish, but you just don't want to cancel the subscription because you think somehow if you do, then all of a sudden that'll be admitting defeat, that you are no longer healthy because you don't have the $100 a month green powder in your fridge? What if you could get rid of that? What if you never had to get another multivitamin and then try to decide which one's the one I should take? Should I take this? Should I take that? What if instead of listening to a podcast, except for this one, but you're listening to some well-known podcaster that all of a sudden starts talking about some supplement, and you run out to GNC or go to bodybuilding.com or go to Drug Emporium and you grab it and you start taking it for a while and you forget why you're even taking it. You don't know what the guy was saying that led you to believe that you need to be taking it and should be in your stack. What if you get rid of all that and narrow everything down to just 3 bottles? Well, you can do that with the foundational stack found at Authentic Health. F1, F2, and F3. The foundational stack, again, 3 bottle caps. That's all. This was developed by Dr. Gus Vickery and Dr. Troy Jackson. Now, let me tell you about Dr. Gus Vickery. Dr. Gus is a family care physician with over 30 years experience. And one of the things that he is keen on is making sure to get blood panels done with all of his patients. Well, after looking at the blood panels of thousands of patients, he has realized that 80% of every single patient that he sees, they were deficient in these certain areas that had to do with nutrients, fats, and essential amino acids. And so what did he do? He created this foundational stack, which includes essential nutrients, that's your F1, essential fats, that's F2, and then your essential amino acids for building lean body mass, that is F3. You can check this out at shopauthentic.health.com. And I'm telling you, these are physician-grade, physician-designed supplements. Now, is this all you're ever going to want to take? No. In fact, here's what I tell everybody. If someone asks me, what supplements should I take? I tell them, I don't know because I've never seen your blood work. That's the first thing you should do. I can tell you, though, if you will take the foundational stack from Authentic Health, that's going to put you miles ahead on the game of getting that cellular health that most all of us want, but for longevity, health span, whatever the buzzword of the day is for living longer and living healthier, that's what this will get you. But then I suggest you go get your blood panels done to then all of a sudden, now you've only got little small gaps that you need to fill as opposed to this big chasm of deficiency that, frankly, in this modern environment, all of us have. We're fighting against toxic water, toxic air. Our food is not exactly top notch. And if you're like me and you don't eat organic all the time, well, then guess what? This stack helps you overcome that. The essential nutrients and the essential fats that you get, this will help make up for the deficits of nutrients that we find in our mass-produced, mass ag, big ag foods that we all consume. So check it out at Shop Authentic Health, shopauthentic.health.com. And full disclaimer, I am an investor. I'm a co-founder of the company. And the reason why I am is because I believe in Dr. Gus. I believe in what he and Dr. Jackson have developed, and it is what I put in my body every single day. And I have gotten rid of the expensive $100 a month green powder because I don't need it anymore. I don't take a multivitamin. The only thing I take is my foundational stack plus some berberine to kind of help control my glucose levels, and then 5 grams of creatine every single day, which I think everyone should take, although I'm not recommending it to you because that's not what I do. I'm not a physician. I'm just saying that's what I do. So anyway, check it out at shopauthentic.health.com. Thanks for listening.
Yusef, good morning, man. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, Jason. Happy to be here.
Well, I tell you, like I said, real quick before we got on, this is one of my favorite conversations to have because you're into health and wellness, you're an entrepreneur, and none of it seemingly from your previous background, like showed signs of, oh, what you're going to do is you're going to start a consumer products business that is plant-based and that's the thing too, upcycling food, which was totally new to me. So we're talking about New York. When I hear of upcycling, I'm thinking of the vintage twin or something like that, where basically the cool kids go get repurposed clothes and make them glamorous again. And you're doing that with leftover oats and stuff, which I found quite fascinating. So this is something I had never even thought about, talked about, or anything. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So with that, let's just do the proverbial, give me a little background, where you started, and then kind of how this journey into not only entrepreneurship, but health and wellness and consumer product goods, which by the way, just for the audience to know, that is a tough nut to crack. The branding, it's so crowded. I mean, trying to stand out. And right now with so many micro brands and boutique brands, I can't even imagine the challenges that you've gone through. So with that, how'd this get started, man?
Yeah. So I'll answer I'll tie it all together with leading with upcycling. So the whole genesis of the idea came in 2014. There was a chef here in New York named Dan Barber who held a series of dinners, pop-up dinners at his restaurant, Blue Hill in the West Village. And basically, what he did is each night a new chef would come in and they would, the pop-up was called Wasted. So they used dishes or ingredients that otherwise would have gone to waste to kind of inform each of the dishes. It was a tasting menu, some multi-courses. One of the courses was spent grain bread. So it was a loaf of bread baked with the leftover grains from brewing beer. And it, simple bread and butter dish. But the story behind it and the flavor and the texture, it was one of those things that just like haunted me. I mean, this happened 11 years ago. Like I'm still thinking about it, and I kept thinking like, this is such a interesting, I'd never heard of anybody doing that before. And it was such an interesting idea. And I thought, this is surely going to be everywhere. Like there's no way this doesn't become a thing. So, fast forward a decade after working in music and working in finance, I kept an eye out for it, never really saw it kind of hit the grocery shelves in a meaningful way. And so, after managing other people's money, which is basically what I did in both music and finance, I decided in the kind of depths of COVID that, you know what, I'm going to quit my job. I'm just going to do something totally different. And this idea has been sitting with me for so long. I really want to try to crack this nut. To your point about consumer packaged goods and food being a crowded space, yes, both of those are true things. I think the thing to keep in mind here is when you're trying to be an entrepreneur, and I'm sure you know this, working in nutraceuticals and kind of health and wellness, trying to identify white spaces is what entrepreneurs kind of excel at. And like I just said, there hasn't really been a breakthrough brand in upcycling, and you've got the zillionth, better for you soda coming to market, functional chocolates and all this other stuff. And the two bells of the ball today in consumer food are protein and fiber. Well, lo and behold, upcycling checked both those boxes. And so trying to approach a category that might be crowded, like snacks, with something that is both unique from a production standpoint, but also satisfies a lot of trends that consumers want and offers nutrient density, like boom, check, check, check. That's why I planted my flag here. Happy to go into detail on kind of any of that because my background is a-traditional to say the least.
Yeah, I do want to go into detail because that's the cool thing to me is like, it's one thing to see something and go, that'd be a cool idea, but that's where most people stop. They walk around with the idea in their head forever, and they never stop to think, okay, how do I make this a reality? And especially something as challenging as what you've undertaken here. So, and it's such a departure, again, from your background. Although I will say this, and we'll get into this with the branding, I got to believe that your background in finance, which is relational, I mean, right? It's understanding the psychology of what people need and want to stay calm, and then music. And so you obviously have a talent for understanding what people want, what kind of moves them psychologically, which I got to think is very, very critical with the branding piece. But as it relates to just you having this exceptional meal, you start to key in on the need for more products with the protein and fiber, which you're spot on that. That's something that's really, Peter Attia is really hammering it, all the Lane Norton, all those guys are saying, we need more fiber, we need more protein. How do you then start to say, all right, what am I going to make? How am I going to package this? How am I going to, did you just start? I see and for those of you not watching, it looks like you got your kitchen behind you. You got a great looking cappuccino maker back there with some, a bunch of cooking utensils. Did you go start experimenting? I mean, take us from how did it start and why did you end up with the little puff snacks, which I love? How did that come into play? So I said a lot. Just give us the genesis, man.
Yeah. Look, I'm the son of two immigrant parents, and like maybe it's immigrant culture that kind of leaked out into American culture broadly. Food is a cornerstone of all of that. Now, having said that, so like growing up as a child, food was always kind of the centerpiece of any cultural event, family event, celebration. And I became kind of obsessed with food. I collect cookbooks. So in between kind of long hours at Goldman Sachs or long hours working at a recording studio, I'd be thinking about what am I going to make for dinner? And food, somebody gave me this line, eventually, so we all eat food, but eventually the people who spend long enough thinking about it, the food eats you. And it was all I could ever, think about in my spare time, and candidly, it was always in the back of my mind, in these kind of high powered financial meetings. And that's actually why I picked food as the thing to do after finance. On the music side of things, you know, so to your point about trying to like, it's very relational. So I worked at a recording studio first. And, I wanted to go where all the musicians were, that just be around all sorts of creativity. And then I also just loved music as a young 20-year-old guy living in New York City. So the thing about working in the music business is you're if you're working behind the recording desk, you're not calling any of those shots, right? Like somebody like taking out the guitar, playing, you got to set up the microphone and then just kind of listen to them prescriptively and solve that problem. And, again, tying this back to being the son of immigrants, my parents did not want me to be a recording engineer. They did not want me working in music. They didn't understand it. So, I got a degree in finance, and I basically took that music background and became a business manager. So I worked for a business management firm that covered a ton of different Grammy Award winning artists, writers, producers based both in the US and abroad. So basically working in the music business from an accounting perspective, right? And I kind of honed a lot of those skill sets on, let's call them hard skills, while also, trying to explain something like a balance sheet and a P&L to, a Grammy Award winner who really doesn't care about margins or budget, and trying to figure out how to relate to people and deliver a super complex idea was just something I did on a day-to-day basis for a decade. Then marrying it with that, kind of what was always in the background, wanting to work in food, having this curiosity about food, being obsessed with food. That was kind of, let's take these hard skills, marry it with the creative relational skills, and boom, that's how I ended up working in food. To your question about like puffs and like, did I just start, cooking and how did I land on it? So, the short answer to this is like, there was no upcycling playbook when I started this company. Upcycling wasn't even really a term. This is like only come out about in the last, call it 4 to 5 years. I just went around to different breweries in like the town that I lived in, asking them, hey, what do you do with all the leftover grain from brewing beer? And it either gets thrown away or they take the rotting grain and they feed it to cows. And here's the thing, cows are ruminants. They'll eat grass, not grain. So they'll eat it. Like if you give a diabetic kid a donut, they're going to chow down on the donut. The problem is they have some tummy troubles when digesting. And so I was like, there's got to be a different way to do this. So I just started playing with their grain. And as you can see, in the kitchen behind me, I took a bunch of different ingredients and just threw spaghetti against the wall, literally trying to figure out which category to go in. That's how I ended up on the puffs.
That's so cool. And so the listener knows I'm kind of going down the same road. So let's just kind of, we'll just diverge for a minute I'm going to ask you for some advice, because I'm kind of going through the exact same thing in my nutraceutical business. We want to offer some ancestral type supplements with organ meats. And so it's almost the exact same thing you did with the breweries. I have it's a consulting client that I've worked with for years, and they own a very large bison ranch. And so they have started a direct to consumer, kind of like, think of Butcher Box or one of those, where they're taking the bison meat processing it, it's going directly to the consumer. And I asked them the exact same question you asked the brewers, except for the organ meats. I said, what do you guys do with the organ meats? I said, we're throwing them away. And so I'm trying to figure out how to effectively source their organ meat, as well as go to other, meat packing plants that obviously have, meat high standards, grass fed, non-GMO or whatever. They don't put a bunch of stuff into the livestock, and get those organs to then dry them, process them, and put them in capsules. So maybe after we finish this conversation, I'll talk to you about, well, just tell me, how did you start getting deals with the brewers? Did they start this? Were they like, here, Yusef, take it? Or were they like, oh, really? You want it? So there's a market for this, so we'll charge you this. And then how do you get it? Did they bag it for you? I mean, I know these are little silly questions that you by this point probably take for granted, but I find fascinating because those are the little things, those are the little hurdles I think a lot of entrepreneurs have in their mind that they can't even articulate. All they know is there's a bunch of shit to do to get those grains into an actual snack. And it's a lot of things and they don't even know what to think of. And that's just where they kind of lock up. So like for me, I want to get the organ meats. I want to get them to somebody to dry, but I've got to figure that out. How did you strike deals with your brewers to get their leftover grains to then eventually turn that into consumable product? What were some of the steps?
Yeah. So the mantra that I live by on a day-to-day basis is like, just solve the problem in front of you that day. Don't worry about what's happening 6 months down the line, a year down the line. Don't solve for problems that like just don't exist. Do we need some kind of crazy AI thing in our tech stack? No, just solve the problem in front of you and keep doing that. And so, directly to your question about going to the breweries, Jason, these microbreweries, they go through, their distribution footprint is like maybe, so this is with a brewery in Pittsburgh in particular. They had distribution in the city of Pittsburgh, but like not really outside of Pittsburgh. So not going really into Ohio, not even going to Philly. On a monthly basis, they were throwing out 10,000 pounds of spent grain, right? So multiply that out by every single microbrewery in the United States. Like it starts to get mind-boggling, right? So no, they didn't. They weren't like, oh, there's got to be a market, but they didn't care. This is just part of their cost of doing business, right? You got to put it out. The municipality comes and picks it up. They pay a fee for that, so it's actually cost like negative for them. So that wasn't really the hurdle. The main hurdle was, how do I get the health department to like let me do this, right? So I had to come up with what's called a HACCP plan. It's a hazard analysis and control point program. You basically have to write down like, okay, the brewery grains out at 3:54 p.m. I tempt the grain and have to take a log of what the grain bill is: barley, oats, wheat, rye, whatever. I then, literally what I was doing is, as they were graining out, I was putting it in these food safe containers, taking all the temp logs, driving it over to my facility, which is like in a licensed shared commercial kitchen, spreading it out onto trays and like drying it. I didn't know like another way to do it. There wasn't a supply chain for it. So, to answer your question, it was literally just like figuring out all these little random things just to get from point A to point B, and having a health department say like, yeah, okay, this is okay to do. So fast forwarding a little bit, so I no longer actually work with spent grain. But this is actually a good kind of dovetail into like the broader scope of upcycling. If you think about just byproducts in food manufacturing generally, you just brought up the organ meats, right? In the meat business, this leaky supply chain exists all throughout the consumer food system. So you think about the juice business, right? All the pulp that gets pressed out. You think about coffee, all the coffee grinds. The two products, raw materials that kind of power my puffs are the leftover oats from making oat milk and the leftover corn fines from making grits. And these little tiny examples, they're everywhere. And people are like, well, I don't understand. Why doesn't this just why don't the big boys just do the upcycling? And the punchline is like, it's not their business model. Like it takes totally different skill set from making whatever it is, oat milk, to making a raw material that is shelf stable and checks all the health boxes and fits all the kind of key components that you need. So hopefully that answers your question.
It's fantastic. Well, first of all, just solving the problem in front of you. What a gem right there. I mean, we could just stop the podcast right there. And I think the listener got all their value, because it's one of the things that all of us tend to do. And I know it's one of the things I've struggled with a lot as a business owner is, you see that it's kind of like the whole Nick Saban process, right? You can't focus on winning the national championship. You got to first focus on those first seconds off the snap of the ball. And if you can do that, man, that's where real magic happens. And then the other things will the wins will take care of themselves. So I think that's genius advice. Also, I think, again, for those would-be entrepreneurs out there, I think you said something incredibly valuable, which is a lot of things I think that keep people out of markets or for taking those chances is they think, well, if it was a good idea, someone else would have already done it, and it's like, no, maybe not. Maybe they either don't want to, it does not make sense. They have outgrown the ability to do something that small, or maybe you may have actually stumbled upon a good idea that just no one else has thought of. So I think that is incredible advice. So I want to take it now to the branding. Like, when did that start to happen? And then let's go through, I love the story of Sam Cooke whenever he started his Samuel Adams beer. He would literally, he brewed Sam Adams, bottled it, and went around to bars in Boston saying, hey, will you buy my beer? Which, again, to the listener, that's how this starts. We're talking to a guy right now that literally idea, went and sourced the product, took it back to the commercial, shared kitchen, made it, and now boom. How do you start making stuff to get it in the mouths of people to say, Yusef, this sucks. I don't care how healthy it is and how good for the environment and sustainability it is. Or, Yusef, this is freaking great. I would totally eat this if you would produce it at a greater scale. Take us through kind of that part of the process.
Yeah, I mean, have a thick skin because you are going to get, wrecked every time crosslight. Because there's not a playbook for this category, I basically, I started by baking cookies. I started by baking bread. I started by just playing in every single category, going to all my friends, family. And then finally, when I thought I cracked the code on how to use certain angles, that's when I started to kind of move outward. I basically just constantly trying to get feedback on the product. And it's one thing to get feedback. It's another thing to really listen to it, digest it, and then kind of action on it. And it can be so demoralizing and degrading and off-putting, just getting kind of rejected on things that you think about all the time. And it's important to just stay positive through those kind of setbacks because they will happen. And so, directly to your question, one of the reasons that I just mentioned, right now I'm using upcycled oats and upcycled corn for these puffs is they're the correct ingredient for that product. The reason that I'm not using the leftover grains from brewing beer is it's not the right ingredient for this product. A lot of people treat food like an equation to be solved. If I just, isolate this variable and then maximize the protein and fiber content, I'm going to have a great product. I think that's actually the wrong way to view food. I think you got to look at it like a symphony to be conducted. There's a place for everything. And then once everything kind of syncs and harmonizes appropriately, you've got a great product on your hands, right? And so, the reason that I'm not using grains for brewing beer is, and this is actually a great example to give you in terms of how do you get consumer feedback. So the predominant grain in most beer is barley. So the grain bill, what the brewers use to actually ferment into alcohol is a mix of usually barley, oats, wheat, rye, some combination of that. The thing about barley and barley malt is it has a super unique flavor. It's quite so malty is the word. It means nothing to layman. It kind of it's best used in confections. Jewish deli owners have been doing this for 100 years. The malted milkshake is a legend for a reason. So once I realized barley malt tastes this way, it is not great in savory applications. So let's just look at confections. That could be cookies. It could be pastry. It could be any kind of truffle. So once you start to let the ingredient inform you, and this could be, part and parcel to, you're talking about supplements, like if you're bypassing kind of olfactory senses entirely, then, world's your oyster there. But if you're really dealing with something that the consumer has to deal with, you want to make it easy for the consumer to like it. Doesn't matter if it's upcycled or not. Doesn't matter if it's protein packed or not. If it doesn't taste good, they're not going to keep buying it. So just letting the ingredient do the talking is really what informed me going to market with any of the products.
That is such, it's crazy that you said this now because I was listening to Lane Norton talk about, I guess he's an investor in David, which is Peter Attia's new protein bar, right? And somebody was slamming him on X about the ingredients or something. And Lane was explaining how there's some ingredient, I can't remember what it was, that would basically simulate the texture or the taste in the mouth of fat, but it wasn't absorbed as fat in the body. And so the guy was saying, the guy was knocking the bar for having this ingredient, and Lane Norton was explaining, like, look, it's like, what's wrong if we figured out a way to get the consumer the sensation of eating fat without absorbing fat, we've done exactly what we wanted to do, which that's one of the things, food science and behavioral science and all the things that go into the bad boys of big food, which are the same folks that taught people to get addicted to cigarettes now teach them how to get addicted to, crappy foods, right? And so, but you can't escape some of that methodology. So to me, it's really amazing that you being a novice in this at one time, you had to figure those things out, that you got to produce something that people are going to like, or no matter how great it is or how virtuous they feel for eating it. If it sucks, they're just not going to. And I think that's great advice. All right. So I want to take this to a point where, when was the moment that you said, okay, I've got enough yeses that I will eat this, so my idea is starting to get some traction, that you decided either one, I'm going to put my own capital into this, I'm going to scale this thing to where I'm going to really go all in, or two, I'm going to go mom and dad, friends, pass a hat. I mean, you got the Goldman background, you understand finance. So that had to have helped you immensely in just understanding how to structure deals, because that's one of the things I talk to entrepreneurs a lot about. They don't understand what is bootstrapping versus taking outside capital, and partners are the most expensive form of capital you'll ever have and the most painful and frustrating. And so when did you get to the point where you're like, okay, I'm going to go either with my own dime or go source some other capital somewhere else to try to make this thing a reality that I can actually scale and turn into a business?
Yeah. So this is not investment advice. I did that the day that I quit Goldman Sachs, which was before I even started this company.
Wow.
Do not do
Wow.
that, by the way.
Wow.
Do not do that. Listen, I am a very curious, tenacious person who, when I commit to something, I am in 120%. And this was not trying to tackle upcycling and food and CPG was not something that I was like, oh, I'll just make this like a side hustle while I do another job. Like I can't split my mind in that way. It just does not work for me. So, from day one, this has been bootstrapped. Yes, I had a friends and fools around where, some family helped out for sure. The other thing is the thing about being constrained by capital is you have to be very creative and scrappy in what you're doing. And so, again, not investment advice. I decided early on, I'm going to raise the smallest friends and family around in the world to do this, to force me to get this thing off the ground. That worked in some regards. It didn't work in others. You have to think about CPGs. You have to be super well capitalized to just even to go to market. I went to market, hilariously undercapitalized. And, the other thing about being an entrepreneur is if you're looking for providence in kind of quote unquote market research, if you're looking for providence and kind of signals without actually just getting your hands dirty, I just fundamentally, look, I've got a bias for action, but I just fundamentally believe you have to just start doing it and see where it goes from there. Again, I would not recommend people do this. Like I have a very supportive wife. I have a very supportive family. And, I had a clear idea of how to make a profitable business get off the ground. And like sometimes profitability gets in the way of some of these, we're talking about like institutional capital or raising outside capital. Venture capitalists, for example, do not care about profitability in the beginning. What they're looking for are moonshots that you can scale to a point of profitability. And at that point, the unit economics start to make sense. I think that is a fundamental mismatch with food, where you can't just rely on scale to solve all of your economic problems. If you don't have line of sight on positive unit economics, you're in trouble. Like you're just going to be throwing money into the incinerator. So like the way I was able to kind of convince friends, family, et cetera, that this is a viable idea is I just took a really hard look at the numbers and was brutally honest, like, here's how I'm going to make this work. And now I'm kind of at the precipice. I can't really get too into detail yet, still working through the NDAs, but I'm at a point where upcycling is going to become a tailwind for me. It's going to be at a point where I can start to get to supplement margins on, you're talking like 80+% gross margins on my products, which is unheard of in CPG, all because of upcycling. It took a really long time to figure out how to do that and get all the pieces into place. But like now I'm going for outside capital because I can set the terms, right? I can be aggressive because nobody else is doing this in this space, or at least nobody else is this far along, specifically in consumer.
That, man, I want to go back to, I don't think it was such a bad, I struggle with that too, how you started out, because I did the exact same thing with my first business. But one of the things I want to ask you, are you familiar with James Altucher? You ever listen to his podcast?
Yes.
Okay. We got to get
Choose yourself.
Yeah. And we got to get you guys together. So Jay Yao, I've actually been on James's show. He did this mentoring series, and I got on there because I connected with Jay Yao, his producer, who's an awesome guy. And, James was one of the first guys that talked to Incredible Foods, the guy that did the plant-based pork rinds. I don't know if James invested in that company or not, but I mean, we've got to get you guys together to tell this story because it's so good. And I think we got to make that connection. But what you said, first of all, about how you started, it's exactly what I did. And I think there's a lot of merit to that. Yes, it's hard to advise somebody to just kind of burn their boats and get out there and go. But man, I tell you, when your back's against the wall, for one, you figure out, are you really made for entrepreneurship or not? I was just having the same conversation last night with somebody about entrepreneurship. And we were talking about how, a lot of people, they think they want to be an entrepreneur. It's a great idea, I mean, especially with Gary Vaynerchuk, basically, and all these other, social media rock stars, the solopreneur and all this crap. Everybody thinks they can be one. It looks sexy, but the reality of it obviously or doesn't always match the reality, right? And so I think whenever you say, the only way I'm going to fund this thing is myself, there is a benefit to that. And I look back, man, now I will say this too. I don't know about you, but, and you're younger than me, I'm certain. I don't know that at this age, I would have the willingness to risk what I did back then, because there's a little bit of hubris and just naivete. And one of the things too, I would encourage people, I'd like to get your idea on this. So you being at Goldman, you're around smart people all the freaking time, which is great. And then, like for me, when I went to graduate school, I did business school. One of the things at business school and being around really bright people, as stimulating as it is, one of the things that kind of the adverse impacts of it, the unintended consequences, is you start to learn too much about what can go wrong, and that will kind of freeze you. So I think that if you do what you did at a pretty young age with a novel idea and a willingness to just like, hey, this is either sink or swim, then you don't get as bogged down by that curse of knowledge, or, well, it's not really a good use of the curse of knowledge, but nevertheless, it can be just, you know too much of what can go wrong. I think a little bit of naivete and kind of just going all out, throwing the dice against the wall as hard as you can. I think there's something to that, man. So granted, I'm like you, I don't advise people to do it because I don't want them to fall on their face. But then I'm also like, and I'm not as smart as you. I mean, it's obviously you've got a lot of bandwidth between your ears. That just comes off immediately. I'm not that guy. I have to really work hard to to look smarter than I am, and I still don't do a very good job of it. And so it was really hard for me. But I think that when you're backed against the wall, at a minimum, it's kind of like those people that lift weights and they think they're going to failure, but they're not. That you can. It's really, really hard to actually train to failure. It's the same thing with what you did, but that will push you there because there's nowhere else to go. So that's kind of brilliant, man. I admire that too. Now, having said all that, to kind of put a bow on my little soliloquy here, what was the planning you did? Because everybody talks about that. You have the people like James Altucher that'll say, keep the side hustle as long as you can and try to, or Gary Vaynerchuk, what are you doing between 7 p.m. and 2 a.m.? And, and that's great advice. I'm not knocking that at all. But at the same time, like I know what I did. I planned out what's my burn rate going to be at home? How much am I going to have to live off of? What was your plan when you left Goldman? Did you give yourself runway, or did you just like, okay, I've got a nut saved. I'm going to burn it at this rate. And I've got a drop dead date that I have to make it by. Kind of what did some of that personal planning for just living the life outside of building the business? How did you plan for that and what it looked like? And I know I all these questions keep popping up. It's something I wrote about in a book one time. How did you prepare the family that would be impacted by this decision around you, that this was about to happen? And what did those conversations look like? And how much did that mean to you during that time? So there, I just rambled a lot, but I think you got it.
No, I got it. So look, this company essentially started in, let's call it February, March 2021. I was living in Battery Park City in Manhattan with my then fiance, now wife. And, we were just coming out of COVID, and it was kind of like, look, I want to do this thing. I want to do it all in. We can't afford to do that here in New York City. We packed up and moved to Pittsburgh. It's where I went to business school. It's where my wife went to undergrad. We had a bunch of other friends kind of moving back there around the same time. It allowed me to, our family to go down to one salary and not have to panic on a month-to-month basis. Like, how long is this going to take to get off the ground? So look, did I get as granular as like, here's my monthly burn rate? Like the answer to that is no, simply because it was such a blue sky thinking process for, the first 18, 24 months, because circular economy ideas and because upcycling is so nascent, there wasn't really I was really hesitant to kind of to plant my flag and say, okay, this is what I'm doing. And like, this is the plan and we're going to stick to it. I needed to give myself enough flexibility to pivot enough time to get to where I am now. And so I was pretty scrappy about every kind of idea that I did. And as a result, it was a series of just public facing, not humiliations, but like I felt flat on my face all the time from ideas that I thought sounded cool and then try to implement them and they just like did not work. It was just being scrappy about like, hey, you don't have a ton of time. You don't have a ton of money. How are you going to like pull this off? And look, the reason that I said I didn't take outside capital, outside of friends and family from the beginning was because it was so nebulous. I couldn't really articulate what the idea was. And, to your other question about how did I prepare family around me? My mom still thinks I'm insane for doing this. She was like, how could you leave Goldman Sachs? It was such a good job. This is terrible. You want to, like, what are you doing? She's very supportive. I'm saying that tongue in cheek, but you're going to get told a lot of times no one's going to tell you like, this is a good idea. You should definitely go do this. And if a lot of people are telling you that, that's when you're kind of in the territory of, oh, well, if this was a good idea, other people would have already done it. Right. You like, it's this paradox of like, you want to be fishing where nobody else is fishing, but you want to kind of hope that there's not a nefarious reason that other people aren't fishing there. Like I said, I have a very supportive wife. I got a very supportive family, and I was just maniacal about, who picks up their family and moves from New York City to Pittsburgh, unless you really are serious about starting this company, right? We moved back to New York City because I was like, if I'm going to do this, like New York's going to be the place where I think I can get it off the ground. But I was like, we only did that after I was confident enough in kind of the direction of the company and, TAMs and all sorts of other stuff. Hopefully that answered your question. I know you put a bunch of feelers out there.
100%. And as someone who picked up his family and moved from Houston, Texas to Tyler, Texas, where we had no family, no friends, but it's where the company I could buy was, and I could start this entrepreneurial venture. I get it, man. And that's another thing. I'm so glad you brought it up, because a lot of people, again, it goes back to the idea of entrepreneurship versus the reality. If anyone out there listening thinks that they're going to be able to keep their exact same lifestyle and everything going as it is, what you do on Saturdays and Sundays and from whatever, and be an entrepreneur of any real magnitude, you're nuts. You're insane. And you don't want it that way. You don't, I mean, it's one of the reasons why, Yusef, I don't know if you ever, I'm sure they've got them all over New York. I used to be on the board of one that, back in Tyler, of these maker spaces, which are or these entrepreneurial centers or something like that. I think they're great. They're well-intended and good things do come out of them. I think one of the reasons why they suffer and they don't generate a lot of entrepreneurs, unless you're at Babson or, MIT or something like that, where it's very technical and engineer related, is because when you've got all the resources you need right there at a real low cost, again, it goes back to the way you start. If your back's not against the wall, you really don't know what you're capable of. And so the fact that you packed up the family and you moved and you made those big life adjustments to see this through, I think that speaks volumes. And I think it's something that every single entrepreneur listening to this must understand. So anyway, kudos to you for doing that, brother. Well, now I think we've gotten to the point now where I want to just talk about the product as it exists today. I've looked at it. I'm going to kind of bust Rachel's chops who set this up for not sending me some snacks before we did this so that I can say how amazing they are. But I'm happy to go out and get some. But tell me about how, the line of products, about the name. I want to talk about the branding, how that happened. Let's talk about the product that actually is out there. We've given some of the background, the history of it. Now, how can people kind of see what's probably not the finished product, because you're going to be around for a long time. There's going to be iterations, but where we are now.
Yeah. So, like maybe 90 days ago, I just went to market with plant-based, protein-packed, soy-free, gluten-free, dairy-free, upcycled crunch puffs that taste like summer camp and save the world. And it's a mouthful there, but basically I released a play on a Cheeto that comes in 3 different flavors, and they're super high in protein. They're relatively high in fiber. They've got half the fat of Cheetos. And one of the things that I wanted to do was like, how do you make something taste like a Cheeto without using cheese or dairy, right? And so like getting kind of the seasonings correct, that was super important to me. And so, like I said, there are 3 flavors. I've got cheddar ranch, which is modeled after Doritos Cooler Ranch, and then jalapeno, which was modeled after Doritos Salsa Verde. So like, I'm a very big Doritos fan. I'm a huge snacker. I wanted to make a snack. So I'm a notorious like doom snacker. Like 2 o'clock comes around in the afternoon, I am like rooting around, my pantry. I will crush a bag of, Cheetos, Doritos, Goldfish, Cheez-Its, Fritos, like you name it. I'm a garbage machine. And the problem is like, I'll just like be mindlessly snacking, shoveling down the food. And so I wanted to make something that scratched the itch of like having a Dorito. Like I wanted to feel like I was eating junk food, but it's actually like super nutrient dense, a very clean label, all the good stuff that everybody wants. And because the protein count is so high, it actually like you can self-regulate on that. Like you feel satisfied after eating, a pouch of this versus you crush a bag of Doritos, you want to open the next bag of Doritos because it's basically empty calories, right? So yeah, the current iteration is these 3 flavors. We're going to be expanding kind of the flavor count. I'm constantly trying to get kind of consumer feedback. What do you like? What do you not? What is important to you? What is not? So like, for example, having just launched 90 days ago on a limited budget, a lot of people don't know this. Certifications like USDA organic, NSF gluten-free, non-GMO, all those certifications, super expensive, very difficult to get. You have to maintain that throughout the supply chain. You've got to get those certifications where you're actually producing. So if you're on a relatively low budget, the best you can do is like try to maintain a clean supply chain if you're not going to go to market with those certs. That said, all that's coming like over the coming months. I wanted to get kind of the initial feedback. What are people liking? What are they not? And so, yeah, like the packaging, the branding. So the name BSides, kind of harkens back to my music days. So a B-side is, for those of you who don't know, it's basically every song that didn't make it onto the original album. Not because it wasn't a good song, but it might have just like not maybe fit the theme or the bill of the album. And that was kind of the approach that I wanted to take to upcycling. There are all of these great gems that get left behind when, sometimes when they're really special, they're actually better than the album themselves. So it also is, homophone, like, ever wonder what they do with the leftover oats from making oat milk? Well, I, wanted to know what we could make with those oats besides oat milk. And so, I'm sorry, Rachel didn't send you some samples. I'll make sure you get some. But yeah, that's kind of like iteration one. There's going to be a bunch of other stuff that's in the works that I'm super excited about. Can't talk about yet, but yeah, happy to explain in detail on any of that.
So where did you were you selling product before you cause now I know you're really going to market. So who were the first people that were like, and how'd you get it into? Was it boutiques? Was it like little bodegas? I mean, who took the chance on you first to go, yeah, Yusef, we'll try this and we'll sell it? Was little health food stores? I mean, what did that look like?
Yeah. The short answer is all of the above. So I'm taking an omni-channel distribution strategy in the sense that it's everything everywhere all at once. Look, in terms of like, how did I figure out if this is going to be a viable product that people were going to like? I ran some very, very small qualitative kind of consumer feedback panels. So you got to get scrappy on like, look, you don't have $100,000 marketing budget. How are you going to afford to do those panels? And a lot of it was kind of like referrals of friends and family. Like I didn't want people who knew me and would have been colored by our relationship and not wanting to offend me. Simultaneously, some of it, you just got to kind of like trust your instincts here. Like, we all eat snacks, like we all eat food. We all have preferences. Food is a very personal thing. You have to be okay with the fact that whatever product you create, somebody is not going to like it. That's just the nature of markets. It's not for everybody. You got to identify who the target consumer is. And, by the way, that's also one thing that I'm like still trying to identify here. You're typically, an entrepreneur identifies a gap like we talked about, and they go to serve that gap. Well, the thing that I wanted to solve for was essentially back solving for a supply chain issue. How do you then repackage that into a consumer facing product? And like, who is the target market for that product? Do you lead with sustainability? Do you lead with the health attributes? Do you lead with both? All that stuff we're still testing that, like the packaging that's out there, like the way to answer directly your question, like how did I get into kind of retail? I've done a bunch of A/B testing. You kind of release, things that lead with health, things that lead with sustainability, things that lead with just, hey, this is a crunch puff. And you kind of, so I'm in 25 retail shops around New York City. None of those retail shops are the same. They're in different neighborhoods, serving different socioeconomic backgrounds. And I'm trying to keep an eye on where's velocity the highest? Who is buying this? What are the repeat rates? And I'm just trying to double down on those. The early kind of distribution partner that I had was DoorDash. So DoorDash has a grocery platform called DashMart. And basically they have these micro fulfillment centers around New York City, but a bunch of kind of other metro hubs where they love taking on emerging brands and testing, if people buy it. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. One of the reasons I'm in the snack category is shelf life. You don't want to be making a baked good that, goes stale after 2 weeks and nobody bought the product, right? You then have to stale out the inventory. Beyond kind of New York City retail, I'm available on Amazon. I'm looking to get like in the next week here or so, we should be on Walmart.com. I'm available direct to consumer nationwide shipping. And to expand kind of that footprint, I've run a bunch of paid ad testing, right? So like, do you lead with which of those segments kind of resonates most? And we're still trying to figure out, the exact messaging. All this stuff is iterative, by the way. Like, it's never like, here's the final product and this is what it looks like and it will never change. Because I think if you do that, you run the risk of going out of business too quickly, right? You just have too many blind spots that you can't adjust without seeing the product in the wild and seeing how it resonates. So you got to kind of pick a lane to begin with, but then like be flexible and open to who's open to this product. So yeah, to answer your question, omni-channel, everything everywhere all at once.
I love that. And I got to believe, yeah, I mean, you've got two great channels. I'm sitting here thinking about, okay, I'm sure there's some really, sustainably focused guy that's also a biohacker that is going to watch what snacks they eat. But there's also some biohacker that's not so much worried about that. And vice versa. There's probably some crunchy, granola person over here that's really worried about sustainability, environment, that has never been in a cold plunge. But yet there's also crossover. And that's interesting. Have you figured out at all kind of like where your product lands the most at this point?
Yeah, it's so it's so funny. Everybody talks about how data is table stakes, but like what people don't talk about is like, what if the data is muddy? What if it's lumpy, right? And you don't have like you can't run a correlation and say, okay, this is like the clear trend. And that's actually what we're finding right now. So, to your point about the biohacker versus the crunchy granola person versus, the video gamer versus the workday warrior versus the tech bro, like who is like the actual target market here? And I have a couple of ideas. I'm going to keep it a little bit close to the chest because, I'm working on some super interesting kind of angles to do disruptive strategies. The one thing that I wanted to avoid that is super relevant. So like, if you look at the snack puff category, it's basically split 49-51. 49% of that market is Cheetos. They have 95% like household, Frito-Lay has like 95% household penetration. That's their business model, right? Totally nutritionally bankrupt, basically has nothing that anybody should actually want to eat, but it's such a household name. Everybody has a childhood memory of that. The rest of the market is fragmented by all of these other kind of better for you players, right? Whether it's ketos or hippies or lesser evil, or there's like dozens of these companies, right? Super crowded. They're all trying to angle for their slice of, well, this is my nutritional attribute and like I'm keto friendly, I'm protein packed, I'm vegan, whatever. And what I want to avoid is like a Me Too strategy in a sense that I am also trying to compete along this vector. What I'd rather do is figure out like, why do people reach for snacks? When do they reach for snacks? What is important to them when they reach for snacks? Because here's the thing that nobody ever talks about with sustainability. Like, yeah, none of us want to like trash the planet. When you're a consumer at a grocery store making choices, you're not thinking how sustainable is my snack puff, right?
All right.
So like that stuff is important to me, but like, how do I make it important to a consumer? And my theory behind that case is like, you got to make it easy and seamless. They don't even realize they're making this sustainable choice. It just so happens that sustainability also fuels all the other things that they want. So you have to prioritize that messaging to consumers. So it's a little like backwards, but it's all iterative.
Yeah, it makes total sense. I'll tell you another thing too. That's kind of like, so I presume your channels are adult markets primarily. So I had David Istier, who started with a company that made, I think he might have been one of the co-founders of the Go-Go pouches that all the kids eat. Then he wanted to take that idea and create a product that's now called Gutsy that is for adults, right? So he took that children's model and applied it to something that adults would consume. I got to believe, and we own one of the largest children's retail businesses in Texas. And so my wife in particular deals with a lot of moms and a lot of kiddos. And I can tell you these moms, they are looking for healthy snacks. They all would love to be able to make their own organic baby foods and that sort of thing. So I got to believe that your product is going to land solid with them. And then what a great way to have those formative years to be able to talk sustainability as well as why you're eating this. Are you really hungry? And if you are hungry, let's make a healthy choice. So I would think that that's got to be going to be a huge market for you as well.
Yeah, the halo of having kind of a snack that like a child might be attracted to is definitely interesting to me. So I have an 18-month-old daughter. She is so curious about every kind of food that I'm eating. So like me being a garbage machine, like I mentioned, I had to get the Captain Crunch out of my house because like she's curious about it and I don't want her eating that. And like, I totally understand kind of the mentality behind parents with, like food that their kids are eating. And if you talk to 100 different people about like, what's a healthy choice or what's a healthy snack, you're going to get 100 different answers, right? There are people who, say, oh, well, it's still a snack puff. So like, is that actually healthy versus like, we should be cooking them actual oats and peas and corn. And I'm saying like, yes, I completely agree. If I had all the time in the world to just cook every single meal for my daughter, I would do that every day forever. But like the reality is 60% of the daily calories that every American eats comes from packaged foods. That number is going up, not down. And the rest of the world, sadly, is catching up to that number. So the only option that I really have as a business owner who deals in packaged foods is how do we make those snacks better? And to me, better means nutrient density. If they're going to be eating packaged foods, we got to make sure that the nutrient profile that they're getting has somehow improved on what came before. Fortunately, today, there are a million kind of options to do it, and everybody does great things in those regards. But just trying to, you got to be careful about like, am I going after the kids market? Like, I know how militant parents are. So I kind of wanted to go towards like, look, a snack that an adult wants to eat and does not feel bad sharing with their kid is great.
Genius. Makes a lot of sense. Man, all right, Yusef, this has been fantastic, man. I love learning about your product, your entrepreneurial journey, and I want to keep up with you. How can people, again, we can buy it on Amazon. It's available now, right?
It's available on Amazon. You can go to the website, enjoybsides.com. We're on Instagram at enjoybsides. Like you can, and then if you're in New York City, deliver it to your apartment via DoorDash. The other thing, Jason, after we hang up here, I'm actually going to give all of your listeners a 20% off coupon if they go to the website. So just use the coupon code Jason Wright.
Love it, man. I appreciate you doing that. We'll definitely post that. We'll get that out far and wide. And Yusef, this has been great, man. I mean, best of luck to you, brother. I'm so glad. I think it's a great product. What you're doing is a great story. And the listeners know this, but I'm very selective about who I bring on, and I loved your product. I loved your story, and you confirmed all of my intuition. So I appreciate it, man.
Thanks so much, Jason. I really appreciate the opportunity.
You bet, brother. All right. Thanks.
Well, that does it for this episode of The Jason Wright Show. Thank you so much for listening. This has been a Texas Titan Media production. Fourth Wall did the music. And as always, thank you so much for listening. Please consider going out to jasonwrightnow.com and signing up for the Vitruvian letter. Also, please go out to iTunes. It takes like 30 seconds to just leave us a 5-star rating. It does wonders for the podcast. I would be so grateful. And with that, until we meet again, go crush it and endeavor to improve always in all ways. I'm out.